Saint Bernadette. I know you guys know Saint Bernadette.
Yeah.
Who appeared to Saint Bernadette?
Mary.
Yes, Our Lady of Lourdes. Now, Bernadette also was from a very poor family. They were so poor, they lived in an old prison because the prison was too bad to put prisoners in. It was too cold and too wet and too old and too gross.
But that
they said prisoners can't live here. But this family has no money, and so we'll let them live there. And Bernadette was always very sick when she was growing up. She had trouble breathing a lot of the time. She wasn't very clever. She wanted to make her first communion. They wouldn't let her make her first communion because she couldn't answer the questions right. But she was always very simple, and she always just trusted that God was going to do what he needed to do. She was never worried that she wasn't smart enough, that she wasn't rich enough, or that she wasn't healthy enough. And one day she went out with her sister and her cousin, I think, and they went to gather wood so that they could have wood for their fire in their little dungeon. And her sister and her cousin were healthier, and they said, we're going to go across the river. And the river was deep and cold. And they said, don't come, Bernadette, you're going to get sick, don't come. And Bernadette was over there praying and collecting the sticks, and this lady appeared. And the lady was Mary, and she was dressed in a beautiful robe, and she was praying the rosary, and she asked Bernadette to pray with her. And so they prayed together, and Our Lady kept appearing to Bernadette. One day Our Lady said, there were all these people there because Bernadette, she said, don't tell anybody, but I saw a lady. And all the people were like, oh, you're crazy. Her sister and her cousin were like, there was no lady. You're crazy. Her parents were like, oh my gosh, like, what's going on? They went and talked to the priest. The priest was like, you're making things up. You're crazy. But the lady had said to come back. She said, I'm going to come and see you again. And her parents wouldn't let Bernadette go. And Bernadette was so upset, and she just cried. But she was obedient to her parents because that's so important. And eventually, her parents decided they had to let her go. And people started following. And the lady would appear. And Bernadette would kneel down. And she wouldn't hear anything anybody else was saying. And one day, as everyone was watching, Bernadette, she sort of looked confused. And she walked towards the river for a minute. And then she stopped and she walked back over to the grass and she dug a little bit in the grass and she ate some of the grass. She ate some of the dirt and she scooped her hand up with some muddy water and she drank that. And afterwards they said, what were you doing? And she said, the lady said to drink from the water. And so I tried to go to the river, but that wasn't what she wanted. She said, right over here where that spring is, but there wasn't a spring. She said, dig a little bit. And they were all like, you're crazy. She's eating grass. She's eating mud. Like, this girl really is nuts. But that night, there was a lady whose baby was sick. And she took her baby back, and there was a spring there. And she put her baby in the miraculous water, and her baby was healed. And all of a sudden, people started getting healed, and people started really believing. They were traveling from all over. They brought some of the water to Napoleon's wife. I think it was Napoleon III, the emperor. And because his child was sick, and his child got better, and Bernadette kept getting in all kinds of trouble because they thought that she was making it up. They thought she just wanted the attention, and they asked her, ask the lady what her name is. And the lady said, Je suis l'Immaculée Conception. I am the Immaculate Conception. Now this was very interesting because Bernadette didn't speak French. She lived in France, but she spoke a different kind of language that they speak, a dialect that they speak in that area that's very different from regular French. But this lady said very clearly, I am the Immaculate Conception. Now, I know you have heard of the Immaculate Conception. What is the Immaculate Conception?
Jesus, Mary.
Mary was conceived without any sin, without original sin. Now, people in the church had known that for a long time, but it only became official dogma in 1854. Pope Pius IX said, hey everybody, you have to believe this. Mary was conceived without any original sin. This was only 1858. Now, do you think that a little uneducated girl in a little village who doesn't speak any of the fancy languages that the other people have been talking about this in, do you think she would know that Mary's name is the Immaculate Conception?
No.
No. So it must have been Mary. And do you think that she could work these miracles with the water? No. So it must have been God through the intercession of his mother. His mother would ask him, and he would work these miracles. Now, Bernadette didn't want any attention. she didn't want people to tell her how great she was. And even though eventually the priest decided that she was telling the truth and he apologized to her for not believing her, she didn't want everyone always coming and asking her questions. She just wanted to pray. And so she went far, far away to become a sister in a different part of France. And nobody knew that she was the one who had had these apparitions. And, everyone was talking about Our Lady of Lourdes, but she wasn't famous for it. She was just an ordinary sister. Because God doesn't want, maybe he wants us to do big things, but he doesn't want us to call attention to ourselves. So Bernadette lived an ordinary life. Now, she kept being sickly. Even though Mary healed all kinds of people, she didn't heal Bernadette, because sometimes what we need is for God to heal us. And sometimes what we need is for God to leave us in our difficulties. And apparently Bernadette, she needed to stay sickly. And she was sickly the whole time she was in the convent, and eventually she died. And she died when she was pretty young, too. She was 35. She was 35 years old. And when she died, they put her in a tomb. And then later they dug her up because they wanted to move her to a special place. Do you know what she looks like?
What? That.
She looks like she's taking a nap. Her body has not decayed at all. They did not embalm it. They didn't do anything. They might have put a little coating of wax on top. Sometimes they do that. When you go and visit her, you can go and see her very body. And it's like Snow White sleeping in a glass coffin. It's been 150 years almost, and she has not decayed at all. She's called incorrupt. And it's God's way of saying, hey, look, this was my servant, and this friend of mine is in heaven with me, and so I want to show you that by doing this amazing thing with her body. But right there, when you go to see her body, and you can see this amazing, incredible miracle, right over to the side, but in front of the body, there's a sign that says Blessed Sacrament with an arrow. Because even though it's so cool that God has kept off the processes of decay and decomposition for the last 150 years, you know what's a bigger deal?
What?
The Eucharist. That every single time we go to Mass, God works a miracle. And he takes his body, blood, soul, and divinity, and he makes it present to us. And it's hidden under bread. It looks like bread, and it smells like bread, and it tastes like bread, but it's not. It's really his body, blood, soul, and divinity. And these people say, oh, it's cool that her body's here, but make sure that you remember the point of all this. The point is not St. Bernadette. The point isn't Mary. The point is that Jesus loves you so much that he died to save you, that he would do anything for you, and that he waits for you in the Blessed Sacrament. But do you think the miracles are over in Lourdes?
No.
They are not. And if you go to Lourdes, you can see whole rooms filled with crutches. Because people came on crutches and didn't need them after they went in the water. Whoa. And wheelchairs. There are wheelchairs that are the blow-operated wheelchairs for people who are completely paralyzed. People who cannot move at all, even to use their hand to move the wheelchair. They blow in a tube. And there have been people who go in the water and walk out afterwards. And the church doesn't like to say that things are miracles just for no reason. So in order for it to be a miracle, we need proof. We need documents showing that there was this terrible thing wrong with you, and then all of a sudden, completely, you were healed. Right? And if there aren't documents, if we don't have evidence from doctors, if we don't have scientists who testify to this, especially non-Christian scientists, then they will not count it a miracle. But there are dozens and dozens of verified miracles and thousands of miracles that aren't approved by the church. And the biggest miracle that God works when people go to Lourdes, it isn't healing their body, and it isn't even necessarily healing their mind or their heart, it's healing their souls. Bringing them back to him through confession so that they can be saints. Because it doesn't matter if you're sick. That can be really hard, but that can be the way that God makes you holy.
Confession counts as a miracle?
Yeah, because God takes a dead soul and brings it back to life. Do you know the only difference between a sinner and a saint?
What?
One confession. Do you know I barely even believed in God, and then I went to confession just because I thought I had to, and I came out, and I knew that God was real, and I knew that he loved me. And now I'm a missionary, right? Or Blessed Charles de Foucault, who really had a hard time believing any of it, and then he went to confession, and he was given the gift of faith. In confession, God turns sinners into saints. It's one of the biggest miracles he works, and you can get it like every week. Well, you two can't yet. But Michael, you can go to confession and you can be turned into a saint and be given the power to follow God in amazing and ordinary ways.
Wow.
Yeah. So Saint Bernadette is a great one for people who are sickly, or for people who are being given attention and don't like attention, or people who are made fun of for loving God.
Or people who cannot breathe very well.
People who can't breathe very well. Saint Bernadette's a great one for that. So we have learned some really cool saints today, haven't we, guys?
Yes.
Yes, we